Hinderer has been telling stories for quite a while. He is a survivor. He survived a war. He survived a tremendous health crisis in the last year or two. And Bill's stories, whether they're serious or funny, tend to stay with you. So I'd like to give Bill a nice, warm Peaks Island welcome.
Thank you and good evening. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the best of times. We were young and fit, intelligent and courageous. It was the worst of times. We were young. Only the young could do what we were doing. And fit, you'd be fit if every day you put on a 75-pound rucksack, hold on your ammunition, took your weapon, and walked on patrol miles and miles through the swamps, rice paddies, and scrub jungle of the Delta of South Vietnam. And intelligent, when you're in combat, there's a certain Darwinian imperative that ensures you're intelligent. And courageous, courage is nothing but the ability to do what you're too scared to do when you have to do it. And we were flying into combat, 30 of us, my platoon, on 5 Huey helicopters flying at 100 knots towards a column of smoke and dust and fire in the distance, like the children of Israel following the column of smoke and fire across the Sinai. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it was just young men following the siren call of battle. Flying at 100 knots with our butts on the deck of the helicopter, our feet hanging out, watching through our feet the light green of the rice paddies, the dark green of the scrub jungle, and the noise inside the helicopter. That 100-knot slipstream going by, it was so intense, and the turbine was whining, and the props were flopping. It would seem so loud that you couldn't hear yourself think. But all you could do was think. As you watched the ground go by, think about what was coming. And I, a second lieutenant, was about to learn 2 military truisms. With that 100-knot slipstream going by, I had my map and I was folding it and folding it and holding it down to try to keep it from blowing away. And I learned the first truism. Back in 1890, a newspaper reporter approached the German Field Marshal von Muchtal and asked him, "Sir, could you please define for me what a battle is?" And Field Marshal von Muchtal screwed his monocle into his eye and looked at that newspaper reporter and said, "A battle is an event that occurs at the fold of a map sheet." And I was learning that because I was folding and refolding, trying to hold my map down. The second truism I learned was, the most dangerous thing in the Army is a second lieutenant with a map and a compass. Because as we were flying around in orbiting in a circle and in figure eights and zigzagging back and forth to avoid incoming artillery and fighter bombers, I got lost. I didn't know where I was on the map. And I started to panic. And I reached over and grabbed the door gunner's sleeve and yanked on it and pointed at my map sheet and pointed at my collar. You see, an officer wears his insignia on his collar. Shook my head and pointed at my map sheet. And the door gunner nodded, spoke something into his mic and pointed towards the front of the helicopter. And I looked up and the co-pilot turned around and looked at me and I pointed at my map and pointed at my collar, my map, and shook his, and he nodded his head. And with his flying glove hand and his finger, he went like this and pointed at the canopy of the helicopter, the plexiglass canopy, and on there was this column of 6-digit figures. That was all the landing zones for the day. And that finger came, just like the finger in the story of Daniel that reaches out and writes, "Mine, mine, Turkey Parsons" on the wall in Babylonia. It pointed to one set of 6 figures, the landing zone we were going to. And I relaxed. I knew where we were going, and that was all that seemed to matter. And the helicopter started to pick up speed and drop down, and the wind came by faster, and the rotor spun louder. The noise was immense. We were on the long approach, and as we started to drop and went faster, alongside pulled a Cobra gunship. And the noise just increased. The noise of that Cobra next to us, the turbine spinning and squealing, it just filled my head, filled the inside of the helicopter. And then the Cobra peeled off, and we kept dropping down. We were going into the landing zone unescorted. And then the noise got even worse, because alongside came a Sky Raider, an A-1, the Air Force's last propeller-driven fighter bomber. They were slow, and they were noisy, and they were heavily armed. And as it pulled alongside, noise was so loud it was like being inside of a bass drum being beaten. And down we went, and suddenly white smoke poured out of the wings of that A-1 as it fired and pulled ahead of us. And the Cobra came right back alongside. And then the noise got even more immense. It started to fire rockets, and that bam, bam, bam just filled our ears. And down we went, and the ground came spinning by faster and faster, just like a jet coming in for a landing. And we slid, all of us slid over on the floor of that helicopter and got our feet down on the skids and started to stand up on the skids. Now, normally, the helicopter crewmen won't let you do this. They're afraid somebody will jump too soon and tip the helicopter over. But today, nobody was saying anything. They wanted us off as fast as they could. And as we touched down, every one of us dove off into the ground, started to crawl, and those helicopters turned off with a hurricane of dust and dirt thrown around, and you could smell that kerosene exhaust, JP4, and we were crawling towards a dike at the edge of this overgrown rice paddy. And from a distance, green tracers started to come towards us. It was a big 12.7 machine gun firing. And when a machine gun fires at you and those tracers start to come, it looks like everyone is coming straight at you. And they float towards you like a tennis ball and then snap past you. Well, as we were crawling, finally, a Phantom jet came zooming over so close, it made the trees at the edge of the paddy wave. It hit its afterburner and went up with a blast of heat, and a 500-pound bomb went gliding off right down that line of tracers. And with a tremendous explosion, it seemed to lift us off the ground and set us back down. And then it was silent. It was like the silence after an immense thunderclap. And then the gods of war threw the light switch, and it turned dark. Along the equator, there is no sunset. It goes from night to dark in an instant, and we are stretched out along this dike. 4-man positions, 1 up, 3 resting, and it was my job to check each position. I kept crawling to each position because I was supposed to do that. I was a lieutenant. But in fact, I did it because I was so tired I was afraid I'd fall asleep. During the night, I crawled up to the position next to Nelson, who was skinny and black as the barrel of the M60 machine gun he carried. Crawled up next to him that far away. "How you doing, Nelson?" He looked at me and he said, "Lieutenant, you know what night this is?" "Night? What night of the week? Why, the only thing you know is how many days you got left in country. You don't know the date. You don't know the day of the week." He said, "This is Saturday night. If I was home, you know what I'd be doing? I'd got some beer or wine, we'd borrow a car, pick up a girl, go to a dance or a movie." That was our reward for working so hard all week. We get to have a good Saturday night. But you know what happens over here? You know what your reward is for working so hard all week? You survive to do it again next week. And then he said, "You know what? It don't mean nothing. It's the blues, man. You dig it? Thank you."